highway stretched out dark and empty ahead. David Park gripped the steering wheel and blinked hard to fight off the tiredness. He had been driving for 12 hours straight. His back hurt. His neck was stiff. All he wanted was to get home and see his mother. The gas light on his dashboard started blinking. David sighed. He needed to stop soon, whether he wanted to or not. A green sign appeared on the side of the road. Next exit, 2 miles. He put on his turn signal even though no other cars were around. The exit ramp led to a small town. David could see a gas station ahead with bright lights. It was one of those old stations that looked like it had been there for 50 years. Only one other car was parked at the pumps. The rest of the lot was empty. David pulled up to pump number 3 and turned off his engine. The sudden silence felt good after hours of road noise. He sat there for a moment, rubbing his eyes. Then he grabbed his wallet and stepped out of the car. The night air was cool. David stretched his arms over his head and felt his spine crack. He was wearing old jeans and a gray sweatshirt. After being in uniform all week at Fort Bragg, civilian clothes felt comfortable. He looked down at his watch to check the time. Almost 11 at night. His mother would be asleep by now. He would have to wait until morning to see her. He slid his credit card into the pump and started filling his tank. The smell of gasoline filled his nose. David leaned against his car and looked around. The gas station had a small store inside with flickering fluorescent lights. A teenager was working behind the counter staring at his phone. David did not notice the police car parked at the edge of the lot. He did not see the officer inside watching him. Officer Brett Thompson had been sitting in his patrol car for the last hour. He was supposed to be patrolling, but he preferred to park and watch. Less work that way. He was a big man with a thick neck and arms that strained against his uniform sleeves. He had been a cop in this town for 15 years. Brett saw David pull up in a nice sedan. Not brand new, but clean and well-maintained. Then he saw the watch on David's wrist as he got out. It caught the light from the gas station. Looked expensive. Brett leaned forward in his seat. Something did not feel right to Brett. A man like that, dressed in cheap clothes, driving through their town late at night with an expensive watch. Brett had been a cop long enough to trust his instincts, and his instincts were telling him to check this out. He started his patrol car and rolled slowly across the parking lot. David was still pumping gas, his back to the approaching police car. Brett stopped his vehicle right behind David's sedan, blocking it in. He put the car in park but left the engine running. David heard the car pull up behind him. He turned and saw the police lights, though they were not flashing. A police officer was getting out. David felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his face calm. Years in the military had taught him to stay cool under pressure. Brett walked toward David with his hand resting on his gun belt. Not on the gun itself, but close enough. It was a habit he had, a way to remind people who was in charge. "Evening," Brett said. His voice was flat. "Good evening, officer," David replied. He kept his tone polite and his hands visible. "I need to see your ID," Brett said. David felt a small spike of confusion. "May I ask why, sir?" Brett's eyes narrowed. "Because I am asking you to show it to me." "That is why," David stayed calm. "I was just getting gas. Have I done something wrong?" "There was a robbery about an hour ago. 2 towns over. You matched the description of the suspect." Brett crossed his arms. David knew this was not true. He could tell by the way the officer said it. Too casual, too quick. But he also knew that arguing would only make things worse. "I have been driving all day from North Carolina," David said. "I can show you my ID. It is in my wallet in my back pocket." "I am going to reach for it slowly now." "Keep your hands where I can see them," Brett barked. David moved very slowly. He reached for his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. He opened it and took out his driver's license. He handed it to Brett. Brett looked at the license. "David Park, address in North Carolina." The photo matched. Brett should have handed it back and walked away. But something made him want to push further. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was something else. "This your car?" Brett asked. "Yes, sir." "Nice car for someone dressed like that." Brett looked David up and down. David felt anger start to rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. "I just came from a long drive. I wanted to be comfortable." "Where did you get that watch?" Brett pointed at David's wrist. "I bought it, sir." "Looks expensive. You got a receipt for it?" David took a slow breath. "I do not carry receipts for my personal items with me, officer." Brett stepped closer. "I am going to need you to put your hands on the vehicle." "What?" David looked at him. Why? Because I am telling you to. Now turn around and put your hands on your car. David's mind raced. He had done nothing wrong. He was just getting gas. But he also knew what could happen if he refused. He had seen the news. He knew the stories. A wrong move, a wrong word, and things could go very bad very fast. He turned slowly and placed his hands flat on the roof of his car. The metal was cool under his palms. He heard Brett step closer behind him. You carrying any weapons? Anything that might stick me? Brett asked. No, sir, nothing. Brett started patting down David's sides and legs. It was rough, more aggressive than necessary. David stared straight ahead and tried to stay calm. He thought about his mother waiting for him at home. He thought about his soldiers back at base. He thought about all the reasons he needed to keep his cool. A woman came out of the gas station store with a bag of chips. She stopped when she saw what was happening. She looked confused. Is everything okay? She called out. Police business. Keep moving, Brett said without looking at her. The woman did not move. She pulled out her phone. Another car pulled into the gas station. An older man got out and immediately saw David with his hands on the car and the officer standing behind him. He also stopped and stared. Brett noticed people were watching now. Instead of making him more careful, it seemed to make him more aggressive. He grabbed David's arm and pulled it behind his back. I am going to need backup here, Brett said into his radio. I have a suspicious individual at the Gas Express on Route 29. David closed his eyes. This was getting worse. He had been stopped by police before over the years. A few times. Usually it ended with a warning or a ticket. But this felt different. This officer seemed determined to find something wrong. Officer, I promise you I have done nothing illegal, David said, keeping his voice level. I was just getting gas so I could drive home to see my mother. She is sick. I have been on the road all day. Save it, Brett said. I have heard every story there is. Within 5 minutes, another patrol car pulled into the lot. A younger officer got out. She was a woman in her late 20s with her dark hair pulled back tight. She walked over quickly. What have we got, Brett? She asked. Suspicious individual. Expensive items. Could not explain where he got them. Matches description of a robbery suspect, Brett said. The younger officer, Michelle Rodriguez, looked at David. Then she looked at Brett. Something about this did not seem right to her. She had worked with Brett for 2 years. She had seen him do stops like this before. They always seemed to target certain people. She had never felt comfortable with it, but she was still new. She did not want to cause problems. Did you find anything? Michelle asked. Not yet. I am going to search his vehicle, Brett said. David turned his head. You do not have my permission to search my car. Brett's face went red. What did you say? I said you do not have my permission. I know my rights. You need probable cause or my consent. You have neither. The woman with the phone was still recording. The older man had called someone and was talking urgently into his phone. More people were starting to notice. Brett grabbed David's shoulder and spun him around. You think you are smart? You think you know the law? I can make your night a whole lot worse if you want to be difficult. Michelle stepped forward. Brett, maybe we should... Stay out of this, Rodriguez, Brett snapped. David looked Brett in the eye. He did not look away. He did not blink. Years of commanding soldiers had taught him how to hold his ground without escalating. But inside, his heart was pounding. This was going to be a long night. The parking lot lights hummed above them. David stood with his hands on his car while Brett paced behind him like a predator circling prey. Michelle shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She wanted to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. More people had gathered now. A family in a minivan had pulled in for gas and stopped to watch. The father put his arm around his young son and whispered something. The boy's eyes were wide. Brett was talking into his radio again. Yeah, send K9 if you have one available. I might need a dog to sniff this vehicle. David felt his jaw tighten. The K9 threat was classic intimidation. Make someone wait for hours while a dog circles their car. Even if the dog finds nothing, the message is clear. You are not in control. I am. Officer, I have been cooperative, David said, keeping his voice steady. I have shown you my ID. I have answered your questions. I have broken no laws. What exactly am I being detained for? Brett walked around to face David. You are being detained because I say you are being detained. That is how this works. Michelle finally spoke up. Her voice was quiet. Brett, we do not actually have cause to hold him. He has not committed any crime that we know of. Brett spun on her. I told you to stay out of this, Rodriguez. If you cannot back up a fellow officer, then maybe you should wait in your car. Michelle's face flushed red. She looked at David, and for a moment their eyes met. David saw something there. Sympathy maybe, or shame. She looked away quickly. I am just saying, Michelle continued, her voice a little stronger now. We need to have a reason. We cannot just stop people for no reason. I have a reason, Brett shot back. He matches a description. That is enough. What description? David asked. What exactly did the suspect look like? Brett waved his hand dismissively. Male, your height, dark clothing? That is close enough. David almost laughed. Dark clothing? In a country where millions of people wore dark clothing every day. But he did not laugh. Laughing could be seen as aggressive or mocking. Instead, he just shook his head slightly. The woman who had been recording spoke up from where she stood. Officer, this does not seem right. This man has done nothing wrong. He was just pumping gas. Ma'am, if you do not step back, I will cite you for interfering with police business, Brett said loudly. The woman did step back, but she kept recording. An older woman came out of the gas station store. She had gray hair and wore a church jacket. She looked like someone's grandmother. She walked right up to the scene without fear. Excuse me, officer, she said firmly. I have been watching from inside. This young man has not done anything wrong. Why are you treating him this way? Brett turned to her, his face red now. Ma'am, I need you to go back inside. This is police business. I'm a citizen. This is my community. I have a right to observe, the grandmother said. She planted her feet and crossed her arms. David felt a small spark of hope. These people did not know him. They had no reason to help him, but they were speaking up anyway. It reminded him why he wore the uniform, why he had spent 20 years serving, because there were still good people out there. Brett was getting flustered now. The crowd was growing. Phones were out everywhere, recording from multiple angles. This was not going the way he expected. I want to search your vehicle, Brett said to David again. If you have nothing to hide, then you should have no problem with that. David had heard this line before. It was a trap. If you have nothing to hide. But the Constitution did not work that way. You did not have to prove your innocence. The police had to have a reason to search. I do not consent to any search, David said clearly. I am invoking my Fourth Amendment rights. Brett's hand moved to his handcuffs. Fine, then I am arresting you for obstruction. Obstruction of what? David asked. What crime am I obstructing? Michelle stepped forward again. Brett, you cannot arrest him for refusing a search. That is not obstruction. That is his constitutional right. Brett whirled on her. Are you questioning me, Rodriguez? Are you undermining me in front of civilians? Michelle's voice shook, but she stood her ground. I am saying we need to follow the law, and the law says he has the right to refuse. For a moment, Brett just stared at her. David could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Brett was realizing that this was not going to be easy. He had a fellow officer questioning him. He had civilians recording. He had no actual evidence of any crime. But Brett was in too deep now. Backing down would look weak. So he did what aggressive people do when cornered. He escalated. Turn around, Brett ordered David. You are coming with me to the station for questioning. On what charge? David asked. I will figure that out when we get there, Brett muttered. He grabbed David's arm roughly and started to pull him toward the patrol car. David did not resist, but he also did not help. He went limp, using a technique he had seen protesters use. Make them work for it. Make them show everyone watching exactly what they are doing. Brett had to use both hands to move David. It looked bad. It looked like what it was, a man being taken against his will for no reason. The crowd was murmuring now. Several people were shouting at Brett to stop. The grandmother stepped into Brett's path. You should be ashamed of yourself, she said, looking Brett right in the eye. This is not what police are supposed to do. Brett tried to move around her. Ma'am, get out of my way or you will be arrested too. Just then, another vehicle pulled into the parking lot. It was a civilian SUV, dark blue. A man in casual clothes got out. He was in his 40s with short hair and an athletic build. He looked around, taking in the scene quickly. Michelle saw him and her eyes widened. Captain Wilson, she said quietly. The man was Captain James Wilson, another officer from their department. He was off duty, still in jeans and a polo shirt. He had stopped for coffee on his way home. But the moment he saw what was happening, his whole demeanor changed. James walked toward them with authority. Even out of uniform, he moved like a cop. "Thompson, what is going on here?" Brett's grip on David loosened slightly. "Sir, I am handling a suspicious individual." He refused to comply with, "Suspicious of what?" James cut him off. He looked at David, then at the crowd, then at Michelle. James had been a cop for 20 years. He had worked internal affairs for 5 of those years. He knew a bad stop when he saw one. "He matches the description of a robbery suspect," Brett said, but his voice was less sure now. "What robbery?" James asked. "I have not heard anything on the radio about a robbery." Brett hesitated. "It was in the next county. About an hour ago." James pulled out his phone. He made a call right there in front of everyone. "Hey, this is Captain Wilson from Station 12. Did you guys have a robbery tonight?" He listened for a moment. "Uh-huh. And what did the suspect look like?" He listened again. "Okay, thanks." He hung up and looked at Brett. "They said the suspect was a white male in his 20s wearing a red jacket. So either their description changed drastically or you are making this up." The parking lot went silent. Even the hum of the lights seemed to quiet. David stood very still. He watched James, trying to figure out if this was a good thing or just a different kind of problem. Brett's face went from red to pale. Maybe I got the details wrong. But this guy still seems suspicious. The expensive watch, the nice car. Having nice things is not a crime, Thompson," James said. His voice was hard now. "You know that. Or at least you should." James turned to David. "Sir, I apologize for this. Can you tell me your name?" "David Park," David said. "Mr. Park, have you been informed of why you are being detained?" "No, sir. Officer Thompson said I matched a description, but he never gave me details." "I was just stopping for gas," James nodded. He looked at Brett. "Do you have any actual probable cause to detain this man?" Brett opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked around at all the watching faces, at all the phones recording. "I was just being cautious." "Cautious," James repeated. The word hung in the air like an accusation. "Mr. Park, did you consent to a search of your vehicle?" "No, sir, I did not." "Did Officer Thompson inform you that you had the right to refuse?" "He told me that if I had nothing to hide, I should not refuse." James closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he looked tired. "Mr. Park, you are free to go. You have done nothing wrong. I apologize on behalf of our department." David felt relief wash over him, but he did not move yet. He wanted to make sure this was real. "He cannot just leave," Brett protested. "I am not finished with my investigation." James stepped close to Brett and lowered his voice. But in the quiet parking lot, everyone could still hear. "Your investigation is over. This man has rights. You have violated them. If you try to stop him from leaving, I will report you myself. Do you understand me?" Brett looked like he wanted to argue, but James outranked him. And more importantly, James was not going to back down. "Yes, sir," Brett finally said through clenched teeth. David carefully pulled his arm free from Brett's loosened grip. He walked back to his car, moving slowly and deliberately. He did not want any sudden movements to give Brett an excuse. But Brett had one more card to play. As David reached for his car door, Brett called out loudly, "You are lucky, you know that? Lucky Captain Wilson showed up. Otherwise you would be in the back of my car right now." David stopped. His hand was on the door handle. He stood there for a long moment, his back to Brett. The card seemed to glow under the parking lot lights. Brett stared at it like it might bite him. His hand started to shake slightly. "Colonel. Not just military, not just an officer. A colonel. Captain James Wilson stepped forward to see the ID. His whole body straightened automatically. Years of military training before he became a cop kicked in. He looked at David with new eyes, seeing the bearing he should have noticed from the start. The way David stood, the way he spoke. "The calmness under pressure, Colonel," James said, and there was respect in his voice. "I apologize, sir. This should never have happened." David held up his hand. "You have nothing to apologize for, Captain. You did the right thing. You stopped something wrong from getting worse." Brett still had not spoken. He was frozen, the ID card in his trembling hand. His career was flashing before his eyes. He had just harassed and illegally detained a colonel in the United States Army, in front of witnesses. On camera, Michelle Rodriguez stood off to the side, her mouth slightly open. She had never seen Brett look scared before. She had seen him angry, aggressive, cocky, but never scared. The crowd was murmuring. The grandmother who had spoken up earlier came closer. She looked at David with new understanding, but also with sadness. "You should not have had to show them that," she said softly. "You should have been treated with respect from the start." David looked at her and nodded. "You are right, ma'am. Thank you for speaking up for me." The father with his young son was explaining something to the boy in whispers. The boy kept looking at David with wide eyes. David wondered what lesson the boy was learning tonight. He hoped it was the right one. Brett finally found his voice. It came out rough and uncertain. "Sir, I did not know. If you had known I was a colonel, you would have treated me differently," David finished for him. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the night air like a blade. "That is the problem, officer. That is exactly the problem," Brett tried again. "I meant no disrespect, sir. I was just doing my job." "Your job," David repeated. He was not yelling. He did not need to. The disappointment in his voice was louder than any shout. "Is your job to stop innocent people for pumping gas? Is your job to threaten them with arrest when they exercise their constitutional rights? Is your job to put your hands on them when they have done nothing wrong?" Brett looked at the ground. He had no answer. James stepped in. "Colonel Park, I want you to know that I will be filing a report about this incident. This is not acceptable behavior for our department." David turned to James. "I appreciate that, Captain, but I want to be very clear about something. This is not just about me. This is about every person who goes through this and does not have rank or credentials to protect them." He looked around at the crowd, the woman still recording on her phone, the family, the grandmother, the gas station clerk who had come outside to watch. These people saw what happened tonight. They stood up. They recorded. They spoke out. That matters more than any rank I hold. David walked back toward Brett. He stood close, and Brett had to look up to meet his eyes. "Officer Thompson, I have commanded over 2,000 soldiers, men and women of every race, every background, every religion. I have led them in combat. I have trained them. I have fought beside them. And you know what I learned?" Brett shook his head slightly. "I learned that every person deserves to be treated with dignity, not because of what they wear or what rank they hold, but because they are human beings." David paused. "I have been awarded medals for my service. I have a Bronze Star. I have bled for this country in places you could not find on a map. And tonight, in my own country at a gas station, I was treated like a criminal. For what? For pumping gas? For being tired and wanting to go home to my sick mother?" The parking lot was completely silent now. Even the distant traffic noise on the highway seemed to fade away. "But here is what really bothers me," David continued. "This is not about me. I will be fine. I know how to handle myself. I have dealt with worse in war zones. But what about the young people who look like me? What about the kids who do not have military training to stay calm? What about the people who do not have rank or education to defend themselves? What happens to them when they meet someone like you?" Brett's face had gone from pale to gray. He looked sick. David took a step back. His voice became softer but somehow more powerful. "I have seen what hate does, officer. I have seen it overseas. I have watched it destroy communities and get good people killed. Prejudice and bias do not just hurt the people you target. They corrupt you. They poison everything you touch." Michelle was listening carefully. She felt like she was in a classroom, learning something important. She thought about all the times she had watched Brett make stops like this. All the times she had stayed quiet. All the times she had told herself it was not her place to interfere. James was also listening. He was thinking about his own department, his own officers. How many others were like Brett? How many incidents had gone unreported? How had he missed this? David addressed Brett again. "You are going to tell yourself that this was just a mistake, that it was bad luck, that you were just being careful. But I want you to ask yourself something. Really ask yourself, why did you stop me tonight?" Brett did not answer. He could not. Was it really because I matched a description? Or was it because you saw someone you decided did not belong? Someone who looked wrong to you? Someone who had something nice that you thought they should not have? The questions hung in the air. Everyone knew the answers. Brett knew the answers, but he could not say them out loud. David pulled out his phone. He took a photo of Brett's badge number, then Michelle's. Then he turned and photographed the patrol cars with their numbers visible. Everyone watched him do it. No one tried to stop him. "I will be contacting your police chief," David said. "I will be filing a formal complaint, and I will be requesting a full investigation into this incident and into Officer Thompson's history of stops." Brett looked like he might cry, or throw up, or both. "But I am also going to do something else," David continued. "I am going to make sure that something good comes from this. Because that is what leaders do. They turn bad situations into opportunities to improve." He looked at James. "Captain, if your chief is willing to listen, I would like to meet with him. I have experience implementing anti-bias training programs in the military. I have resources on accountability measures that work. I would like to help your department be better." James nodded immediately. "I will make that happen, sir. I guarantee it." David turned to Michelle. "Officer Rodriguez, you tried to speak up tonight." "That took courage. Do not lose that. Police departments need more officers like you. Officers who are willing to stand up when they see something wrong." Michelle felt tears in her eyes. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The grandmother stepped forward again. "What can we do? Those of us who live here?" David smiled at her. It was the first time he had smiled all night. "You already did it, ma'am. You spoke up, you recorded, you did not look away. That is what communities need to do. Hold police accountable, demand better, and support the good officers who are trying to do right." He looked around at all the faces watching him. What happened here tonight was wrong, but it does not have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of change, if we choose to make it that. A young man in the crowd spoke up. He looked like a college student. "Can I ask you something, sir?" "Of course. How did you stay so calm?" "I mean, I was getting angry just watching." "How did you not lose your temper?" David thought about the question. Training helped. Experience helped. But honestly, I stayed calm because I know that anger makes things worse. It gives people like Officer Thompson an excuse. It lets them say you were aggressive or threatening. I have seen too many situations go bad because someone lost control. He paused. But also I stayed calm because I had hope. Hope that someone like Captain Wilson would show up. Hope that people like all of you would speak up. Hope that this country I have served for 20 years still has good people in it who believe in justice." The father with the young son came forward. "Thank you," he said simply. "My son needed to see this. He needed to see someone stand up for what is right without violence, without hate. That is a lesson worth more than anything I could tell him." David knelt down to be eye level with the boy. The child looked nervous but curious. "What is your name?" David asked gently. "Marcus," the boy said quietly. "Marcus, you saw something tonight that was not fair, but you also saw people try to make it right. You saw your dad stop to watch and care. You saw that grandmother speak up. You saw a police officer do the right thing even when it was hard. Remember that, okay? Remember that we all have choices. We can be like Officer Thompson or we can be like Captain Wilson. We can stay silent or we can speak up." Marcus nodded seriously. David stood back up. He looked at his car. His gas tank was full. The pump had finished long ago. He walked over and put the nozzle back. Then he took his receipt from the machine. Such a simple action. The thing he had come here to do. Pump gas and get a receipt. He turned back to the crowd. "I need to go now. My mother is waiting for me. She is sick and I have already lost too much time tonight." Brett finally spoke again. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Colonel Park, I am sorry." The sun came up over the police station like it did every other day. But this was not going to be an ordinary day. Chief Robert Martinez knew that the moment he checked his phone and saw 17 missed calls. He was a veteran himself, 25 years in the Marines before joining the police force. He had been chief for 10 years. He thought he ran a good department. He thought he knew his officers. Watching the video that someone had sent him at 6 in the morning, he realized he had been wrong. The video had been posted online around midnight. By morning, it had 50,000 views. By the time Chief Martinez got to his office at 7, it had 500,000. And the numbers kept climbing. He watched it 3 times. Each time made him angrier. Not at the people recording. Not at Colonel Park, at Brett Thompson. At himself for not seeing this sooner. Captain James Wilson was waiting in his office when he arrived. James had not slept. He had spent all night writing his report, calling the chief, and trying to figure out how to handle what was coming. "Tell me everything," Chief Martinez said as he sat down heavily in his chair. James told him, "Every detail. The illegal stop, the threats, the searching without cause, the moment when Colonel Park revealed his rank, and most importantly, the pattern of behavior that James had suspected for years, but never had concrete proof of. Thompson has been doing this for a while, sir. I have heard rumors, complaints that went nowhere, but last night I saw it with my own eyes, and it was all recorded. Chief Martinez rubbed his temples. Where is Thompson now? At home. I told him not to come in today. Rodriguez is also at home. She submitted her own report this morning. What does her report say? James handed over the papers. She confirms everything. But she also admits that she has seen Thompson make questionable stops before and never reported them. She is asking for help understanding how to handle these situations better in the future. The chief read through Rodriguez's report. It was honest, painful, the kind of honesty that showed real growth. She has courage, he said. Yes, sir. I think she could be a great officer with the right guidance. Chief Martinez nodded. He picked up his phone. I need to call Colonel Park before this gets worse. He found David's number through Fort Bragg's public directory. A secretary connected him. The phone rang 4 times. Martinez wondered if the colonel would even answer. This is Colonel Park. The voice was calm and professional. Colonel Park, this is Chief Robert Martinez from the police department where you were stopped last night. Sir, I want to begin by apologizing. Chief Martinez, David interrupted gently. I appreciate your call. Before you continue, I want you to know that I understand you were not there last night. I do not hold you personally responsible for what happened. Martinez felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Thank you, sir. But as the chief, the responsibility does fall on me. This happened on my watch, in my department, and I need to make it right. I am glad to hear you say that, Chief, because I do not just want apologies. I want change. Yes, sir. I have already placed Officer Thompson on administrative leave pending a full investigation. I am also reviewing his history of stops to see if there is a pattern. There is a pattern, David said. I guarantee it. Men like Thompson do not suddenly start behaving this way. It builds over time. Martinez knew he was right. Colonel Captain Wilson mentioned that you offered to help us implement better training. Is that offer still on the table? There was a pause. Martinez could hear background noise. Sounded like a kitchen. Coffee being poured. Are you a veteran, Chief Martinez? Marines, sir. 25 years. Then you understand what I'm about to say. In the military, when we have a problem, we do not just punish people and move on. We identify the root cause, we train. We implement systems to prevent it from happening again. We hold people accountable at every level. Yes, sir. That is what your department needs. Not just punishment for Thompson, though that is necessary. You need systematic change. Training for all officers. Clear accountability measures. A culture where officers like Rodriguez feel empowered to speak up when they see something wrong. Martinez was writing notes as fast as he could. I agree completely. What do you suggest? David took a sip of what sounded like coffee. First, you need to investigate Thompson thoroughly. Check his body camera footage if he has one. Review all his stops for the last 5 years. Interview the people he has stopped. I am willing to bet you will find a clear pattern of racial profiling. Already started, sir. Second, you need anti-bias training for your entire department. Not just one seminar they sit through while checking their phones. Real training. With accountability. With testing. With consequences for those who refuse to participate meaningfully. Can you recommend someone who does this kind of training? David smiled, though Martinez could not see it. I can do better than that. I have implemented these programs in military units. I can help you design one specifically for your department. If you are serious about change. Martinez sat up straighter in his chair. Sir, I'm very serious. What would you need from us? I need you to be honest. With me, with your officers, and with your community. I need you to admit that there is a problem. Not just with Thompson, but with the culture that allowed him to behave this way for years without consequences. That was harder to swallow. Martinez wanted to defend his department, but he had watched the video. He had read the reports. He knew David was right. I can do that, Martinez said quietly. Good. Then I will help you. But Chief, I need something from you first. Anything, sir. I need you to promise me that this is not just about managing a public relations crisis. This is not about making the viral video go away. This is about genuinely becoming a better department. Because if this is just damage control, I'm not interested. Martinez thought about his answer carefully. He looked at the photo on his wall. His son, who was mixed race. His son, who was now 16 and learning to drive. His son, who would be on these roads soon. What kind of police force did he want his son to encounter? Colonel Park, I promise you this is real. I promise you I want real change. Not just for the press. For my community. For my officers. And honestly, sir, for my son. There was another pause. Then David spoke and his voice was warmer. Tell me about your son, Chief. They talked for another 20 minutes. Not about the incident. About families. About kids. About the world they were trying to build. By the end of the call, they had a plan. David would come to the station in 3 days. He would meet with the leadership. He would observe their training. He would help them build something better. When Martinez hung up, he felt hopeful for the first time that morning. But he also felt the weight of the work ahead. Captain Wilson was still waiting. What did he say, sir? He is going to help us. But James, this is going to be hard. We are going to have to admit some ugly truths. About Thompson. About our department. About ourselves. James nodded. I know, sir. But it is necessary. The chief stood up. Call a meeting. All senior staff, 1 hour. And get me every complaint filed against Thompson for the last 10 years. Every single one. While the police department scrambled to respond, the story was spreading. News vans were setting up outside the station. Reporters were calling. The mayor was demanding answers. And online, people were sharing the video over and over. David watched some of the coverage from his mother's living room. She sat next to him on the couch, her hand on his arm. She was weak from her illness, but her mind was sharp. You handled that well, son, she said. Her voice was thin but proud. I am not sure I handled it well, Mom. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently. You stayed calm. You stood up for yourself. You did not let anger control you. That is handling it well. David leaned back against the couch. I keep thinking about all the people this has happened to who did not have a camera watching. Who did not have a captain show up. Who did not have rank to protect them. His mother squeezed his arm. That is why you have to help them now. You have a platform. Use it, she was right. His phone had been ringing all morning. News shows wanted interviews. Civil rights organizations wanted to talk. Other veterans were reaching out to share their own stories. He had ignored most of them. But there was one call he needed to make. He dialed Fort Bragg and asked for General Patricia Chen, his commanding officer. David, she answered immediately. I saw the video. Are you okay? I am fine, ma'am. I am at my mother's house. I have already contacted the Army's legal office. We can provide support if you want to pursue charges. David appreciated the offer. General Chen was a fighter. She did not back down. But that was not what he needed right now. Thank you, ma'am. But I think I can handle this as a civilian. I do not want this to be about the Army pressuring a local police department. I want this to be about citizens demanding better. General Chen was quiet for a moment. You're right. That is the right approach. But David, if you need anything at all, you call me. Understood? Understood, ma'am. And David, I am proud of you. The way you handled yourself last night is exactly what we teach leadership to be. Calm under pressure, principled. Focused on solutions, not revenge. After he hung up, David felt his mother watching him. What? He asked with a small smile. You are going to do this, or not you? You are going to try to fix that police department? I am going to try, Mom. She shook her head, but she was smiling. You always were stubborn, just like your father. They sat together in comfortable silence. Outside, the world was spinning. Social media was exploding. News cycles were churning. People were taking sides, writing think pieces, making this incident fit into their existing views about police and race and justice. But in this living room, it was just a son and his mother. And that was what mattered most to David. Not the viral video, not the news coverage. The fact that he was here, safe, able to sit with his mom when she needed him. His phone buzzed again. A text from Captain Wilson. Press conference at 2 p.m. Chief wants you to know he is taking this seriously. He is putting Thompson on unpaid leave and opening a formal investigation. David showed the text to his mother. It is a start, she said. Only a start, David agreed. The hard part comes next. His mother patted his hand. The hard part always comes next, son. That is life. But you are ready for it. David hoped she was right. Because changing a police department, changing a culture, changing the way people thought about power and prejudice, that was harder than any mission he had led in the army. But he had to try, not just for himself, for every person who had gone through what he experienced last night, for every young person of color who was afraid of the police, for every good cop like Michelle Rodriguez who wanted to do better, but did not know how. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His mother leaned against his shoulder. He could feel her breathing, slow and steady. She had fought her own battles with prejudice decades ago. She had taught him to stand tall, to never accept less than the dignity he deserved. Now it was his turn to fight, not with weapons, not with anger, but with patience, persistence, and the belief that people could change if given the right tools and motivation. Outside, the sun climbed higher in the sky. The news vans kept coming. The phone kept ringing. The world kept spinning. But David was ready. The work was just beginning. 3 months passed like a slow river. Change did not come fast, but it came steady. The investigation into Brett Thompson took 6 weeks. They went through everything. 5 years of stops, body camera footage, dash cam videos, interviews with dozens of people he had pulled over. The pattern was clear and ugly. 83% of his stops were people of color. In a county where people of color made up only 30% of the population, some of the stories made Chief Martinez sick to his stomach. A black teenager pulled over 7 times in 1 year for matching descriptions. An Hispanic family searched on the side of the road in the rain because Thompson smelled marijuana, even though none was found. An Asian professor questioned for 20 minutes about his immigration status despite being born in Ohio. Thompson was fired, not suspended, not allowed to resign quietly. Fired. The report was made public. Chief Martinez held a press conference and admitted that the department had failed, that they had ignored warning signs, that they had let fear of conflict override their duty to the community. It was painful. It was embarrassing. But it was necessary. Brett Thompson sat in his living room watching the press conference. His wife had left 2 weeks ago, taking their daughter. She said she could not look at him the same way anymore. He had tried to explain, to justify, to make her understand. But how do you explain being the villain in a video watched by millions? He thought about calling David, apologizing again. But what would he say? Sorry I treated you like a criminal. Sorry I only regretted it when I learned your rank. The words felt hollow, even in his own mind. Instead, he sat alone and wondered who he had become. He did not start out this way. He remembered his first day as a cop, full of ideals about protecting people. When did that change? When did suspicion replace service? Maybe David was right. Maybe prejudice did corrupt the person who held it. At the police station, real change was happening. David had come every Tuesday for 12 weeks. He brought training materials, case studies, and hard truths. The first session had been tense. Officers sat with their arms crossed, defensive. They thought this was going to be another lecture about how they were all racist. But David surprised them. He did not lecture, he told stories. About soldiers under his command who had overcome their own biases, about mistakes he had made early in his career, about the difficulty of examining your own assumptions. I am not here to call you bad people, he told them that first day. I am here to help you be better cops, because this community deserves better. And honestly, you deserve better too. It is exhausting being suspicious of everyone all the time. The officers started to listen. Not all of them. Some stayed defensive. But enough listened to matter. Officer Michelle Rodriguez became one of his strongest advocates. She had been terrified after that night at the gas station. Terrified she had ruined her career by questioning Brett. But instead, she found support. The chief praised her integrity. David met with her personally to thank her. She had spent the last 3 months learning everything she could about bias in policing. She read books. She attended extra training. She started a program for new officers to help them understand community perspectives. She also started speaking up more. When she saw a fellow officer making a questionable stop, she asked about it. politely but firmly. "Hey, what was your probable cause there?" Sometimes the other officers got defensive, but sometimes they paused and reconsidered. On a Tuesday afternoon, she was working with David on a training scenario. He played the role of a civilian being stopped. She played herself. The other officers watched. "Ma'am, I need to see your ID," Michelle said to David in character. "Why am I being stopped, officer?" David asked calmly. Michelle paused. In the old days, she might have gotten defensive, demanded compliance, but now she tried something different. "You have a broken tail light. I'm just going to give you a warning so you can get it fixed." "Thank you for telling me that," David said. "Here is my ID." The interaction was simple, respectful. It took 30 seconds, no drama, no confrontation. David stepped out of character. Did everyone see what Officer Rodriguez did right there? She told me why I was being stopped immediately. No games, no power plays, just clear communication. That is how you build trust. Some of the older officers still looked skeptical. One raised his hand. "But Colonel, what if someone is actually dangerous? What if being too polite gets us hurt?" David nodded. "That is a fair question. Officer safety is crucial. But think about it this way. When you escalate unnecessarily, when you treat every interaction like a threat, you create the very danger you are trying to avoid. People get scared. They get defensive. Things spiral." He clicked to the next slide. Military data shows that treating civilians with respect in combat zones actually reduces attacks on soldiers. The same principle applies here. Respect and clear communication make you safer, not less safe. The training continued for weeks. Some officers embraced it, some resisted. A few quit, claiming they could not do their jobs under the new scrutiny. Chief Martinez accepted their resignations without argument. Meanwhile, the community was also changing. The grandmother from the gas station, whose name was Dorothy Wallace, had organized a community forum. She invited police officers, community members, and David to come talk. The first meeting was packed. Standing room only. People were angry. They shared stories of their own encounters with police. Some of the stories were heartbreaking. A mother whose son had been stopped at gunpoint for fitting a description. A veteran like David who had been treated with suspicion despite his service. A young girl who was now terrified of police officers. The officers who attended listened. Some shifted uncomfortably. Some took notes. A few looked like they wanted to defend themselves, but held back. David let people speak. He did not try to minimize their experiences or explain them away. When it was his turn to talk, he was honest. What happened to me at that gas station happens to people every day. Most of them do not have cameras watching. Most of them do not have rank to protect them. That is why we need to fix the system, not just punish one officer. He looked around the room. But I also want to say something to the officers here. Thank you for coming. It takes courage to sit here and listen to criticism. It would be easier to stay away. The fact that you are here means you care, and that gives me hope. Several officers looked surprised by his gratitude. One raised her hand. "Colonel, how do we rebuild trust? Some of these people will never trust us again." David thought about the question. Trust is not rebuilt in a day, or a month, or even a year. You rebuild it through consistency, through accountability, through showing up even when it is hard, through admitting mistakes, through treating every single person with dignity, every single time. Dorothy Wallace stood up from the audience. "I will tell you how you earn my trust. You earn it by getting rid of officers like Brett Thompson before they hurt someone. You earn it by believing us when we say someone is treating us wrong. You earn it by being the kind of officer we can call when we need help without being afraid." The room erupted in applause. After the forum, David walked out with Dorothy. The night air was cool. "Thank you for organizing this," he said. "Thank you for helping us," she replied. A lot of people would have just taken their lawsuit money and left town. David had been offered several settlements. Lawyers had called offering to sue the department for 6 figures. He had declined. Money does not fix problems. It just makes them easier to ignore. Dorothy looked at him with respect. "You are a rare kind of person, Colonel. I'm just trying to do what is right." They walked a bit further in silence. Then Dorothy spoke again. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. How are you really doing? I mean, after everything. That had to hurt being treated that way." David stopped walking. He looked up at the stars. "It did hurt. More than I expected. I have been in combat. I have been shot at. I have seen terrible things. But somehow being treated like a criminal in my own country hurt worse than any of that." "I understand," Dorothy said softly. "I have lived with that hurt my whole life." They stood together under the streetlight, two people from different generations who understood the same pain. "But you know what helps?" David continued. "Seeing change happen, seeing Officer Rodriguez step up, seeing the chief actually take this seriously, seeing you organize this community, that helps." Inside the police station, Chief Martinez was working late again. He had been working late every night for 3 months. His desk was covered with new policies, training schedules, and accountability measures. Captain Wilson knocked on his door. "You should go home, Chief. Get some rest." Martinez looked up with tired eyes. "Just want to finish reviewing these new stop procedures." James came in and sat down. "Sir, can I say something?" "Always. What we are doing here, it matters. I have been a cop for 20 years. I have never seen a department take something like this seriously. Usually it is just talk. But you are actually changing things." Martinez leaned back in his chair. "I have to, James. When I saw that video, when I saw Colonel Park standing there with dignity while Thompson treated him like garbage, I was ashamed. Ashamed of my department. Ashamed that I did not see it sooner. You are seeing it now. That is what counts. Is it enough, though? All these new policies, all this training. Will it actually change anything?" James thought about Michelle Rodriguez, about the younger officers who were embracing the new approach, about the community members who were starting to come to forums and speak with officers instead of avoiding them. "It is changing things," James said. "Slowly, but it is working." Martinez nodded. He closed the folder on his desk. "Tell me something. Do you think Thompson will ever understand what he did wrong? I do not know. Maybe. Or maybe he will spend the rest of his life thinking he was just unlucky. That he was unfairly targeted. Some people never want to look in the mirror. That is what scares me. How many other officers are out there like him? Not just in our department, everywhere." James stood up to leave. "That is why what we are doing here matters. If we can show that real change is possible, other departments might follow." After James left, Martinez sat alone in his office. He thought about his son. About the world his son would grow up in. About the police force his son might encounter. He picked up his phone and called David. It was late, but he needed to talk. "Chief Martinez," David answered. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, Colonel. I just wanted to thank you for everything you have been doing, for not just suing us and walking away, for actually helping." "You do not need to thank me, Chief. You are doing the hard work. I am just providing guidance. Still, it means something. And I want you to know this is not just for show. This is real. We are really changing." David smiled into the phone. "I can see that, Chief. Keep going. The hard part is not over yet." They talked for a few more minutes, then said goodbye. Martinez finally packed up his things and headed home. As he walked to his car, he felt something he had not felt in months. Hope real. Solid hope that they were building something better. 1 year later, everything looked different. The police department had changed so much that other departments were coming to study what they had done. The training program David helped create was being used as a model across the state. Officers who completed it reported feeling more confident, not less. They understood that treating people with respect made their jobs easier, not harder. Michelle Rodriguez had been promoted to sergeant. She now trained new recruits, teaching them from day one that accountability and integrity were not weaknesses but strengths. The young officers looked up to her. She had become proof that speaking up for what was right would be rewarded, not punished. The department had also hired a civilian oversight board, real community members with real power to investigate complaints. Dorothy Wallace was on that board. She took her job seriously, reviewing every complaint, asking tough questions, making sure nothing got swept under the rug. The changes were not just on paper. The statistics told the story. Complaints against officers were down by 60%. Use of force incidents had dropped by half. And surprisingly to some, crime had not gone up. In fact, it had gone down slightly. Turned out that when people trusted the police, they were more likely to report crimes and cooperate with investigations. Not everyone was happy about the changes. Some officers still grumbled about the new policies. Some community members still did not trust the police and maybe never would. Change was messy and incomplete, but it was real. David had gone back to Fort Bragg after those first 3 months, but he stayed in touch. He video called into training sessions. He answered questions from officers. He met with Chief Martinez every month to review progress. His mother's health had improved. Not completely, but enough that she could do the things she loved again. Garden, cook, volunteer at her church. She told everyone about her son. Not about his rank or his medals, but about his character. About how he had turned a terrible experience into something good. On a warm spring afternoon, David found himself driving on that same highway again. He was visiting his mother for her birthday. As he approached the exit for that small town, he felt his stomach tighten. He had not been back to that gas station since the incident, but he needed to face it. Needed to see if it would still make him feel small and threatened. So he took the exit. The gas station looked the same. Same old building, same bright lights, but something felt different. Maybe it was him that had changed, not the place. He pulled up to the same pump. Number 3. He got out and started filling his tank. The smell of gasoline brought back memories. The fear, the anger, the feeling of being powerless, but also other memories. The people who stood up for him. Captain Wilson who stopped it from getting worse. Michelle Rodriguez who tried to do right. The grandmother who spoke out. All those ordinary people who refused to look away. Colonel Park. David turned. A young man in a gas station uniform was standing there. He looked about 20 with nervous eyes and a hesitant smile. Yes? David said, I am sorry to bother you, sir, but I was working that night. The night Officer Thompson stopped you. I was the clerk inside. David remembered him now. The teenager on his phone behind the counter. I just wanted to say I am sorry I did not come out and help. I saw what was happening on the cameras and I just froze. I was scared, I guess. But I should have done something. David shook his head. You were young. You were scared. That is understandable. Maybe, but I have thought about it a lot this past year, about what you said at the community forum, about how everyone has to speak up. So I wanted you to know, if something like that ever happens again, I will speak up. I will not just hide inside. David reached out and shook the young man's hand. That means a lot. Thank you. The clerk smiled with relief and headed back inside. David finished pumping his gas. As he was putting the nozzle back, a police car pulled into the lot. His body tensed automatically. Old reflexes, old fears. But then he recognized the officer getting out. Michelle Rodriguez walked over with a confident smile. Colonel Park, I heard you were in town. Thought I might find you here. Sergeant Rodriguez, David said warmly. Congratulations on the promotion. Thank you, sir. I wanted to catch you before you left. Chief Martinez is having a small gathering at the station tomorrow. Anniversary of the reforms we put in place. He was hoping you could come. David hesitated. I do not know if that is a good idea. This should be about the department's success, not about me. Michelle shook her head. Sir, with respect, this is not about celebrating you. It is about showing where we came from and where we are going. Your story is part of that. But more importantly, a lot of people want to thank you, including me. She looked down at her boots, then back up at him. That night changed my life, Colonel. I was ready to quit being a cop. I thought I had to choose between being a good person and being a good officer. You showed me I could be both, that I had to be both. David felt emotion rise in his chest. This was why he had stayed involved. Not for thanks or recognition, but for moments like this, for knowing that something good had come from something bad. I will be there, he said. The next day, David walked into the police station. It had been a year since he had been inside. The walls were covered with new posters about community policing and de-escalation techniques. Photos of officers working with kids at schools, quotes about service and integrity. The conference room was packed. Officers, community members, city council representatives. Chief Martinez stood at the front with Captain Wilson and Sergeant Rodriguez. When David walked in, everyone stood up. Not because of his rank, but out of respect for what he had helped them build. Chief Martinez walked over and shook his hand. Thank you for coming, Colonel. Thank you for inviting me. They gathered around a table with a cake and coffee. The chief called everyone to attention. I want to thank you all for being here today. 1 year ago, our department faced a crisis. We had to look in the mirror and see some ugly truths about ourselves. It was painful. It was hard. Some of us wanted to deny it or minimize it. He looked around the room, but with Colonel Park's help, we chose a different path. We chose to change. And today I can say with confidence that we are a better department. Not perfect. We still have work to do, but better. Dorothy Wallace raised her hand. Can I say something? Of course, Mrs. Wallace. She stood up, leaning on her cane. I have lived in this town for 73 years. I have seen a lot of things, good and bad, and I want to tell all you officers something. For the first time in my life, I feel like I can call the police without being afraid. That is a big deal. That is worth celebrating. Several people in the room wiped their eyes. Some of the older officers looked down, maybe thinking about all the years when Dorothy had felt afraid, all the times they had not noticed or cared. Captain Wilson spoke next. I also want to say something to Brett Thompson, wherever he is. I hope you are listening somehow. What you did was wrong, but it led to something right. It forced us to be better. So in a strange way, I guess we owe you thanks for showing us what we could not keep being. David had not expected Brett's name to come up, but James was right. Brett's actions had been a catalyst. A painful but necessary wake-up call. Someone in the crowd called out, "Do we know what happened to Thompson?" Chief Martinez nodded slowly. He moved to another state. Last I heard, he was working in construction, not in law enforcement. Michelle added, "He sent me a letter a few months ago, apologizing. He is in therapy, working on himself. I do not know if he has really changed, but at least he is trying." David thought about that, about whether people could truly change. He had seen it happen in the military. Soldiers who started out with prejudices and ended up trusting their lives to people they once feared. It was possible. Not easy, but possible. "Can I share something?" David said. Everyone turned to him. "When I drove here yesterday, I stopped at that gas station again, for the first time since the incident. I was nervous. I did not know how it would feel." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But standing there, pumping my gas, I realized something. That place does not have power over me anymore. That night does not define me, and Officer Thompson's prejudice does not define my worth." He looked around the room. "What defines me, what defines all of us, is what we do next. How we respond to injustice. How we work to fix broken systems. How we treat each other." The room was silent. A lot of people told me to sue the department, to take the money and move on. They did not understand why I stayed involved, why I spent my weekends coming here to do training, why I cared about a small police department in a small town. He smiled. "But I care because change has to start somewhere. It has to start with people who are willing to do the hard work. People like Chief Martinez, who admitted the department had problems. People like Sergeant Rodriguez, who found the courage to speak up. People like Mrs. Wallace, who organized the community. People like all of you who chose to be better." David walked to the front of the room. "In the Army, we have a saying. Mission first, people always. Your mission is to serve and protect. But you cannot do that mission well if you forget the people, all the people. Not just the ones who look like you or think like you or make you comfortable, all of them." He looked at the younger officers. "Some of you were not here when this happened. You came after. You have been trained in the new way from the start. That is a gift. Use it well. Be the kind of officer that makes people feel safe, not afraid." Then he looked at the older officers. "Some of you had to unlearn old habits. That is harder, but you did it. You chose to grow instead of staying stuck. That takes courage." Finally, he looked at Chief Martinez. "And some of you had to admit you missed the warning signs, that you let problems fester. That is the hardest thing of all. But you did it, and now you are building something that can serve as a model for other departments." Chief Martinez stepped forward. "Colonel Park, on behalf of this department and this community, I want to present you with something." He held up a plaque. "This is our first Community Leadership Award. It goes to citizens who go above and beyond to make our community better. There is no one more deserving than you." David accepted the plaque. He read the inscription. "For turning a moment of injustice into a movement for change. For showing us that dignity and courage can transform systems. For believing we could be better and helping us get there." After the ceremony, people lined up to talk to David. Officers asked questions about training. Community members shared their own stories. A young black teenager told David he was thinking about becoming a cop now, which he never would have considered before. As the crowd was leaving, David found himself alone with Chief Martinez and Captain Wilson. "You know what the best part is?" Martinez said. "Other departments are reaching out to us. They want to know how we did this. We are sharing your training materials with 5 other departments now." "That is good," David said, "but make sure they understand it is not just about materials. It is about commitment, about really wanting to change, not just checking a box." "We tell them that," Wilson assured him. "We tell them it was hard, that we lost some officers who did not want to adapt, that it took time and effort, but that it was worth it." David looked around the station one more time, at the walls covered with community photos, at the diverse group of officers talking and laughing together, at the atmosphere that felt different than a year ago, less defensive, more open. "You did this," David said to them. "Not me, I just gave you some tools." "You did the work?" Martinez shook his head. "We did it together, Colonel, and we are going to keep doing it." That evening, David drove to his mother's house. She was waiting on the porch, a birthday cake on the table beside her. "How was it?" she asked as he climbed the steps. "Good," he said, sitting down next to her. "Really good. Are you proud of what you did?" David thought about the question. "I am proud of what we all did. I am proud that something positive came from something negative. I am proud that a police department had the courage to change." His mother cut the cake and handed him a piece. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset. "You know what I think about?" David said eventually. "What, honey?" "I think about all the people this happened to before. Before cameras. Before social media. People who had no one to speak up for them. No one to believe them. They just had to swallow the injustice and keep going." His mother nodded. "I was one of those people. Many times. I know, Mom, that is why this mattered. Not just for me. For all of you. For everyone who came before and everyone who will come after." She patted his hand. "That is why I am proud of you. Not because you are a colonel. Not because you handled it well. But because you remembered that it is not just about you." They finished their cake as the stars came out. Somewhere in that small town, police officers were on patrol. Some of them were making better choices because of the training. Some community members were calling the police without fear because of the changes. Some young people were considering law enforcement as a career because they had seen it done right. And somewhere, maybe, Brett Thompson was thinking about the night at the gas station. Thinking about the colonel he had misjudged. Thinking about the person he had been and the person he wanted to become. Change was slow. Change was incomplete. But change was possible. David had learned that lesson in war zones and military bases. He had learned it in hospitals where wounded soldiers recovered. He had learned it in leadership schools and battlefield decisions, but he learned it most clearly that night at a gas station. The night he was treated unjustly. The night ordinary people stood up. The night a police department chose to look in the mirror. That night had been terrible, but it had also been a beginning, and sometimes that was all you needed. A beginning, a spark. A moment when people decided to be better. The rest was just work. Hard, daily, unglamorous work, but work that mattered. David looked up at the stars, the same stars that had watched him that night a year ago. He was the same person, but the world around him was different. A little bit better. A little bit more just not perfect, never perfect, but moving in the right direction, and that was enough.